My ex tried to cheat. Instant karma happened. It started with the small things. A missed goodnight text. An absent-mindedness during dinner. Mark had always been a bit preoccupied. Focused on his work, his code, his own little world. But in the beginning, it was endearing. I thought it meant he was driven, ambitious. After 5 years, it just felt lonely. Our apartment, once a haven of shared jokes and cozy nights, became a space we simply cohabitated in. Dinners were eaten in silence, punctuated by the clinking of silverware and the glow of our separate phones. Evenings were spent on opposite sides of the couch, him lost in the intricacies of some new program, me lost in the growing chasm between us. I started suggesting things, weekend getaways, cooking classes, anything to bridge the gap. He always had an excuse. Too busy, too tired, too something. The fight, when it finally came, felt almost anticlimactic, a slow burn finally erupting. I accused him of not listening, of not caring, of being emotionally unavailable. He retorted that I was being needy, demanding, that I didn't understand the pressure he was under at work. He didn't deny my accusations, didn't even try to argue. That was the worst part. It was like he was relieved to finally say it. "Maybe we just want different things, Sarah," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Those words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I knew, deep down, he was right. We did want different things. I wanted a partner, someone who was present, who cared. He wanted, I didn't even know what he wanted. The breakup was surprisingly easy. We divided our belongings, canceled our subscriptions, and went our separate ways. No dramatic scenes, no tearful goodbyes, just a quiet resignation. The months that followed were a blur of sadness and forced normalcy. Emily, my best friend, was my rock. She dragged me out for drinks, forced me to watch cheesy rom-coms, and listened patiently as I rehashed the same conversations over and over again. I started going to the gym, trying new hobbies, anything to fill the void. I even tried dating, but every guy I met felt like a pale imitation of Mark, or a reminder of what I was missing. Then, out of the blue, Mark reached out. A simple text message. "Hey, how are you?" My heart did a little flutter. I ignored it. I told myself it was just a reflex. But the message lingered in my mind, a persistent little itch. He followed up a few days later, this time with a longer message. He apologized for hurting me, admitted he had been selfish and emotionally distant. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of reflecting, and he realized he had made a mistake. He wanted to talk, to see if there was a chance, however small, that we could try again. I showed the message to Emily. She rolled her eyes. "Don't do it, Sarah. He's just trying to manipulate you." I knew she was probably right, but a part of me wanted to believe him. Maybe he had changed. Maybe he had finally realized what he had lost. Against Emily's advice, I agreed to meet him for coffee. He looked different. Softer, maybe. He seemed genuinely remorseful. He talked about going to therapy, about understanding his own issues. He listened, really listened, when I talked. We started slowly, cautiously. Dinner dates, walks in the park, quiet evenings at my place. It felt good. Familiar, but with a new layer of awareness. He seemed more present, more engaged. He remembered the little things, my favorite flowers, my go-to coffee order. It was like he was trying to rewrite our history, to erase the mistakes of the past. I let myself believe it. I let myself fall again. But then the red flags started appearing. Small, almost imperceptible at first. He became secretive with his phone, always turning the screen away when I was near. He started taking calls outside, whispering into the receiver. He was evasive when I asked about his plans, offering vague answers and changing the subject. My anxiety crept back in, a familiar, unwelcome guest. I confided in David, a coworker who had always been kind and supportive. He listened patiently, offering a neutral perspective. "Just be careful, Sarah," he said, his eyes filled with concern. "Don't ignore your gut feeling." Mark announced a business trip. "A conference in another state," he said. "A crucial opportunity to network and potentially land a promotion." The timing felt off. The conference coincided with Lisa's wedding. Lisa, an old friend of Mark's, someone he had known since college. I had never met her, but I knew she held a special place in his past. My gut screamed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, haunted by doubts and suspicions. I decided I needed to know the truth. I needed to find out what Mark was really up to. I knew it was wrong, invasive, a complete breach of privacy. But I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my stomach. With Emily's help, I managed to guess his password. My hands trembled as I logged in, the screen blurring through my tears. The emails were a goldmine of deception. A series of carefully crafted messages between Mark and Lisa, revealing a plan so callous, so manipulative, it made me physically sick. The business trip was a lie. He was going to Lisa's wedding. He was using our reconciliation to impress Lisa's father, a wealthy investor who could potentially fund his startup idea. And if the text messages were anything to go by, he was planning on sleeping with Lisa at the wedding. The texts were explicit, detailing his desire for her, his intention to use Sarah as a stepping stone. The world spun. My vision blurred. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I spent the next few days in a daze, numb with disbelief and betrayal. Emily urged me to confront him, to expose him for the liar he was. But I was too paralyzed by shock and anger to act. Then, on the morning of the wedding, I woke up with a newfound sense of clarity. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I wasn't going to be a victim. I was going to fight back. I spent the day meticulously planning my revenge. I called Emily, who was, as always, ready to assist. I booked a flight to the same city as the wedding. I arrived at the wedding reception just as the party was getting into full swing. The air was filled with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Couples danced on the floor, oblivious to the drama that was about to unfold. I scanned the crowd, my heart pounding in my chest. I spotted Mark almost immediately, standing near the bar, laughing and chatting with Lisa and an older man who I guessed was her father. He looked handsome, confident, utterly devoid of guilt. I took a deep breath and walked towards them, my hand clutching my phone, the evidence of his betrayal burning a hole in my pocket. As I approached, he saw me. His face paled, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Sarah?" he stammered, his voice barely audible above the music. "What are you doing here?" I ignored his question. I looked directly at Lisa, her face a mask of polite curiosity. "Lisa," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I think you should know what kind of man you're dealing with." I paused, letting my words sink in. Mark tried to interrupt, to deny, but I cut him off. "Mark has been lying to both of us," I continued, my voice rising above the din of the party. "He's been using me to impress your father, hoping to get an investment for his company. And he's been telling you that he wants to be with you, while simultaneously stringing me along." I held up my phone, displaying the text messages between Mark and Lisa. The room went silent. All eyes were on us. Lisa's face flushed with anger. Her father looked like he was about to explode. Mark stammered, desperately trying to deny the accusations, but the evidence was irrefutable. The text messages spoke for themselves. Lisa's father, his face red with rage, turned to Mark. "You disgust me," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "I wouldn't invest a single cent in your pathetic little scheme." He turned to Lisa, his expression softening. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I had no idea." Lisa, tears streaming down her face, slapped Mark across the face. "Get out of my life," she screamed. "I never want to see you again." Mark's carefully constructed world crumbled around him. His face was ashen, his eyes filled with panic. He had lost everything. I watched as he stumbled away, his reputation ruined, his dreams shattered. It wasn't a pretty sight, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had played me, he had lied to me, and he had paid the price. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Mark tried to contact me begging for forgiveness, but I refused to answer his calls. He showed up at my apartment pleading and desperate. I called the police and filed a restraining order. He lost the potential investment, his reputation was tarnished, and his career was in jeopardy. The company he worked for launched an internal investigation, reassessing his role. I focused on myself, on healing and moving on. I leaned on Emily and David for support. I started therapy, processing my emotions and learning to trust my instincts. I excelled at work, gaining confidence and independence. I set firm boundaries for myself and refused to tolerate disrespect. David became an increasingly important part of my life. His kindness, his genuine interest in my well-being, was a welcome contrast to Mark's manipulation and deceit. We started spending more time together, going to concerts, exploring new restaurants, simply enjoying each other's company. One evening, as we were walking home from a movie, he took my hand. It felt natural, right? I didn't pull away. "Sarah," he said, his voice soft. "I know you've been through a lot, and I don't want to rush things, but I really care about you." I looked into his eyes, seeing honesty and compassion. I smiled. "I care about you too, David," I said. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if David and I will end up together, but I do know that I'm stronger, more resilient than I ever thought possible. I deserve better, and I'm finally ready to embrace a future filled with happiness and authenticity." One night, Mark arrived at my apartment door, looking completely disheveled and desperate. He was ranting about how his life was ruined, how it was all my fault, and how he needed me to take him back. Fear pulsed through me, remembering the charm he had once used to manipulate me. Without hesitation, I called the police and had a restraining order placed against him. The relief I felt as he was escorted away was immense. It was a clear message to myself and to him I was done. The healing continued, but I knew that I was finally free.